Mic looks like it's on. Yay. I'm Susan Smith. We're in my studio, Stitched by Susan, and we're looking at things from a different angle this morning. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about my thread storage, and I have a couple of tips for you, one of which you may not have ever seen before. So we'll just give YouTube a moment to let everyone know that I'm here. Meantime, the grandkids and the daughter and the son-in-law have all gone home early this morning, so it's a little bit of a downer day for me. So got my quilting started. That's always my go-to. Planning a bike ride later this afternoon and a baseball game this evening, so that'll be fun. Okay, we're starting to see a couple of people join. Just waiting for a few more, and again, we're going to talk about thread today. You're seeing my collection over my shoulder. I meant actually to count my slots, so let's just do that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 56 slots. There we are. There comes a rush of people. Okay, Kayla Quilts, hello. And others tuning in. There we go. Cindy, fantastic. Glad to see you all here. Okay, today's topic is thread storage and a couple of tips that are perhaps unusual that I see as useful for thread storage. So first off, this is my lovely rack, and my first comment is an apology that I can't tell you where to go for this rack. I got it years ago at a fabric store that was closing down for 20 bucks, and it has been my favorite forever. So I've got 5,000 yard cones on it. So these are big cones, right? And they fit perfectly in the slots. I can get 4 in each slot. So I have 56 places times 4 is room for 224 spools, but at any rate, 56 different colors if I wish to. So my thread storage has kind of evolved around this particular rack because I absolutely love it. And I do tend to keep 50-ish colors available in my studio. That's sort of personal choice and has to do with the amount of quilting I do, maybe even the style of quilting that I do. But you can see I have quite a lot of teals and blues. I have quite a lot of grays and sages, and even a fair number of reds. Those are just, they're colors that I use often. And over time, you know, when I have a quilt comes in and I want to color match it well, I'll sometimes order a new color, and sometimes an older one that I don't use as much anymore will sort of drop off. Like for example, I hardly ever use a denim blue anymore. So I literally don't keep that on hand. But that just has to do with my style of quilting, so you'll know yours. But my first choices of colors are some great grays and tans, because having a couple 3 shades of each of those will go a long, long way. But I happen to love color, so I like to keep a ton of colors. However, a couple of my tips for thread storage are this. Think about using something deeper, like my rack is here, rather than the pegboard that we see so often. At one point, I thought too, a pegboard must be an efficient way to store a thread, right? Each spool just fits right up next to, you know, the one before it pretty much. But in fact, this 200 or so cones would take floor to ceiling about an 8-foot chunk of wall. That's a lot of wall space to give up to thread storage, and I don't have actually a ton. I've got 2 lovely windows in my studio, including a set of patio doors. Right, so I don't want to use up all my wall space for that. So this rack, which is about 3 feet by 3.5 or maybe 44 inches, holds a ton of thread. So I think looking for something that has some depth is a better option. Even a bookcase is a better option, in my opinion, than a pegboard and having them all out singly, because it's shallow and you have to have space for every single cone. More efficient to have several together. My friend Sam Alberts of Quilting Curve Studio actually has some little recessed alcoves built like between the studs of her studio, because it's an interior wall, and that looks really pretty in her studio, so that's an option. A lot of people feel like they do not want their thread to be exposed to a lot of sunlight or long terms of daylight, and so then a craft, you know, the plastic, inexpensive drawer stacked craft display dressers that you can get are a really good option. That would keep your thread out of direct light. Now in my case, I don't have direct sunlight on this, and also I go through it at a fairly rapid clip and I'm kind of first in, first out, like we used to do in the food system years ago. And so none of my thread sits a long time ever in sunlight. So I'm not too worried about it. I've not found it to be an issue, but if that's a concern to you, then those deep drawers that are deep enough for thread are a pretty economical and efficient way to store your thread too. Let's see if we're getting any comments in before I give you my one other great whacker of a tip that's unique and I love it. Kayla, Cheryl, Debbie, Naomi, Anne from France. Anne, I so appreciate you joining in. Marion caught me live again. Daphne, Tammy, fantastic. Okay, and one other tip for you guys. This came from my son who is a golfer. We were looking for ways to store bobbins with their matching thread color. I mentioned earlier, I like to have, and I suggest you have, several shades of gray, several shades of tan, and sometimes they're not very far removed from each other, and particularly if it's in the evening and not daylight, it can be hard to tell exactly which bobbin matches which cone. And I like to use matching threads, right? So I want to keep my bobbin that's partially wound, partially used with the appropriate cone. So I started by looking for golf tees. But my son then, who's the golfer, suggested these, and they're little food picks, like sandwich picks, really inexpensive at a craft store or a restaurant supply place. And they just pop down through the bobbin and into my cone. And again, this is a little bit specific to my rack, but my front cone has room enough for that to fit. Do you see how that happens? And so even if I've got two partially filled bobbins, if I pre-filled and I overshot the mark, I can stack several on there and it totally doesn't matter. And then my further back cones don't have any bobbins attached to them. Does that make sense? So that's what works with my display unit. Your display may be a little different. You may have a different idea. But I found these little wooden picks to work super well. And I experimented with a couple things like drinking straws that have the hinges in them, just a little too flimsy. Golf tees, like I said, most of them tended to hardly be tall enough and they're quite a bit more expensive. So this worked really well. The little food sandwich picks work super, super well. Let's see if any of you have thought of that before. Okay. Donna is asking, do you like variegated? I personally don't care for variegated, Donna. I don't use it very often. However, if you do and you love it, no reason you can't have a selection of variegation in your shelves as well. It's just not something I happen to keep on stock. Debbie got the skewers and they work great. Kayla, how do you keep the cones from unspooling? My drawer is a mess. No little hook on most of the cones to put the end of the thread in. Okay, that's one of the reasons that I love the Instacord brand, is because they do have a hook to put the thread in. But if all else fails, a rubber band around it also will help to hold that thread tail in place. I certainly have elsewhere in my drawers, I do have some other sort of miscellaneous thread I've bought over the years, and some of those don't have that hook, right? And that's how I do it. I just keep a handful of rubber bands in there and wrap that around the cone. Less successful with the bobbins, and this has been a thing I've thought of over time. There are solutions for it. You can buy plastic C-clips that go over bobbins. I have so many that would be kind of prohibitively expensive. I've seen people do it with like a clear, some kind of tubing, and they cut it into slices and open it. So I think that would be a great option. But what has happened for me is, in practice, my bobbins stay pretty neat on these. They don't get handled a bunch, right, between quilts. And so the odd time I'll have a string hanging down 12 inches or so, but not typically. So I do nothing with my bobbins. I simply wind them up when I go to put them on, and you can see there's a little bit of a thread tail, but it's not really in my way or hurting anything, and so there you go. And because I'm not handling all of them like you might be in a drawer when I handle one of them, they seem to stay fairly well intact. Barbara is suggesting try wrapping Hugo's Amazing tape to keep thread from unraveling. Is that like a tape that sticks to itself, Barbara? I'm not familiar with that product, but I might have to look into it. Olita is asking, do you use Isacord for piecing as well? Typically I don't. It's not that I couldn't, but I have also some good quality cotton thread, and I tend to do my piecing not in matching colors, right? So I have like a parchment, it's called, in my particular brand, and a couple shades of gray in that. So basically that's a sort of almond color and a light to medium and a medium to dark gray, and that's kind of all I piece with. I hardly ever piece with white fabric, so therefore I don't need white thread, and those sort of cover all my bases. So I prefer to keep that on my sewing machine, and then I don't have to change my thread very often, and I don't have to keep very many different bobbins, because I use so much of the same piecing colors. Marion, use children or baby rubber bands for bobbins. That's a great idea too. If your bobbins are giving you grief, a tiny rubber band will work. Super. Well, this has been some great tips from you all. Oh, and hi from Germany, Gabrielle. Lovely. Naomi has asked, how many cones of each color do you keep? Well, I can tell you what I've got, Naomi, but this may not be the answer for you. As I got into quilting for clients and building sort of my thread catalog, I started keeping 2 or a minimum of 2 of every color, because I like to have 1 for my top thread and 1 to wind my bobbins, so I don't have to change back and forth, and I don't have to pre-wind all my bobbins. So that was my first sort of jump in quantities, was keeping 2 each of all my favorite threads. At this point, you can see that I've got 3 or 4 on a lot of these spots, and I also have a drawer below, which you can't see. It's like a credenza. There we are. And in my credenza, I have even more, particularly of my most common colors. That's because I do quilting in a fairly big way, and now I only place a thread order once or twice a year, and then I get quite a lot of my favorite colors, and it helps me to get a really discounted price. So that's kind of several considerations you might think about as you think about how much thread you want to have. That's all the comments. Okay, I think that's it for today, you guys. It is Friday today, so I'll be back tomorrow with another live, and then again every single day next week. We're still working on our workshop that I've been promising you guys. Bless your hearts, you've been so patient. Hopefully an email will go out today with that first workshop invitation in it. And it's coming up, the first one will be starting next Thursday. So Thursday and Saturday and Sunday of next weekend, I'll be hosting that workshop live. It's at different times of the day, so that hopefully you can find one to attend live so that we can chat like this. And it's part talking about quilting and teaching about getting into free motion quilting, if there's been things that have holding you back, reasons you feel like you can't do it, and it's part a coaching session. I feel like I am naturally an encourager, and so that's what I'm going to bring to the table. I want to encourage you. If you've been wanting to get started with free motion quilting, maybe you already have a computerized machine, or maybe you already quilt with paper pantographs, or maybe you have not done machine quilting at all. In any of those cases, I want to show you why I believe that anyone who wants to can be a free motion quilter. And so by show, I mean I'm going to tell you some of my stories, I'm going to tell you some student stories, and I'm going to share a lot of pictures that just illustrate that point so much. I just want to be an encouragement to anyone that wants to machine quilt like I do. You can. You absolutely can. So that will be coming out hopefully later on today, fingers crossed, and I will be back again live tomorrow morning. Feel free in the comments to these sessions to be typing in any questions or topics that you'd like to hear discussed, and I will bring those up over the next week or two. And also, thumbs up if you're enjoying these episodes. Remember to watch the full playlist. It's called May 2025 Daily Snippets, so you can binge watch all of the ones that have come so far if you haven't seen them yet. Subscribe to the channel and turn that little notification bell on so that you are notified by YouTube when indeed I am live. And I look forward to chatting with you again tomorrow. See you then.